Chapter 18. Gold. 3 days later, and just like Malcolm had promised, I pushed my lawnmower, trimmer, and broom out of Gary's garage and onto the street. I stood at the end of the driveway, looked right, and then left. Guess it doesn't matter which way I go. The other side will be there tomorrow, I thought. I turned right and headed up the street. The owners of the first two houses I checked on were polite, but they told me no. The third house I stopped at really needed to have its yard mowed. It looked like it hadn't been mowed in weeks. I left my equipment on the street, walked up to the driveway, and knocked on the door. An elderly woman appeared at the glass door and opened it. "Yes, sweetie," she said to me. "Ma'am, I was wondering if you would be interested in having me mow your yard." She sighed. "Well, I'd love to have it mowed. It sure does need it, but I just can't afford it right now. My husband used to mow it, but he passed away last month." I looked at her and then the yard. I wasn't sure what to do. I spoke, almost without thinking. "I'll mow it for free." There was no way I was going to walk away from that house without helping that lady. This was my chance to help someone in need. She looked at me. I couldn't accept that. "Ma'am, it would be my pleasure. I insist." She smiled. "Thank you so much. Money's been so tight and I just didn't know how I was going to get the yard mowed." "You are an answer to my prayers. Thank you." I started the mower and went to work on the backyard. I was grateful that I had the chance to help someone else. As I finished the front yard, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down and the driver motioned for me to come over. "Yes, sir?" I asked as I leaned down to the window. "I live down the street. I need my yard mowed. What do you charge?" $25, including trimming." "Kid, you got a deal. Just let me know when you're ready. I'll park my car in front of my house." It didn't sound so bad being called kid that time. After all, he was going to be my first paying customer. I knocked on the lady's door after I finished her yard. "All done," I said proudly. "Thank you so much. I wish there was some way I could repay you." "You're welcome. Please don't worry about repaying me. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to help you." I headed to the house of the man who owned the Mercedes. I knocked on the door and let him know that I was going to start to mow. "Just let me know when you're finished," the man said. I fired up the mower and began working. I was finished an hour later. "Let's take a look," said the man when I knocked on his door again. I had done the best job I could. The entire yard was cut to a uniform height, and all the clippings had been neatly swept and bagged. The edges and the areas around the trees had been trimmed. The man nodded in approval. "Good job, kid. Good job." He reached in his pocket and handed me $30. "Thanks for going the extra mile. Here's a $5 tip." I smiled and took the money, thanking him. "Sir, may I have permission to put a sign in the front yard?" He agreed, and I thanked him again. I pushed my mower around the corner. When I got out of sight of the man's house, I stopped and pulled the money out of my pocket. I can't believe how good it feels to hold this money in my hands. This $30 might as well be a pound of gold. I didn't know that making money could feel this good. This was money I made myself, with my own business. I had listened to Malcolm's advice about owning a business and it made sense, but seeing those bills fanned out in my hand made it real. It was true. I owned my own business. I had made $30, and it only took an hour. I put the money back in my pocket and headed up the street, looking for the next yard to mow. By the end of the summer, I built my business up to 10 yards a week, and I was charging $25 per yard. Following the plan that Malcolm had created for me, I had managed to save almost $3,000. It was time to buy a used truck. Malcolm and I browsed the newspaper ads. We found a 5-year-old truck. It was spotless, just like Gary's and Malcolm's. The owner said he had bought it to help out while his daughter was in college. It had high miles, but they were all highway miles, and he had every maintenance record. There was no doubt that this truck had been well cared for. 2 hours later, I became the owner of the truck. Malcolm and I went to the insurance agent, where Malcolm helped me get insurance. Back at Gary's house, I stood in the yard and looked at the truck shining in the sun. I couldn't believe it was really mine. The following Saturday, instead of Gary driving me to the lighthouse, I drove Gary. Gary told me how proud he was that I was able to buy my own truck. Malcolm was waiting on us. As we started running, he asked, "So how's business?" It amazed me that Malcolm was asking me and Gary. We were both business owners. I couldn't help but smile. Gary started, "It's going great. Best it's ever been. In fact, I've had so much going on that I've had to refer some work to Lance. You know, the guy that quit on me. He's been sending me commissions." "Really? That's great," Malcolm smiled. "That's one of the reasons I told you to help him be successful. If you hadn't done that, you would have lost money. Not only was it the right thing to do, but you were also making money. Never burn a bridge. You might have to cross it again, and you never know where it'll lead you." I listened, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Let me get this straight. Gary, you are saying that you told someone to hire Lance, and they did, and then Lance paid you?" Gary and Malcolm laughed. Malcolm explained, "Yes, Tony, that's right. By sending that work to Lance, Gary made sure the customer was going to have the work done by somebody Gary knew would do a good job. Plus, Lance paid Gary. And someday, the shoe may be on the other foot. Lance may have too much work and send his overflow to Gary. Gary wouldn't be in this situation if he hadn't made the decision to help Lance." I thought about that as we continued to run. I couldn't believe Malcolm was teaching me so many ways to make money. Sometimes it seemed like he could just pull money out of the air. A few minutes later, Malcolm asked me another question that would change my life. "Tony, have you ever thought about running a marathon?" "No. I mean, that's about 26 miles, isn't it?" "That's right. Well, 26.2 to be exact." "How could I run that far?" "Well, you're already running 9 around the lake. If you can run 9, you can run a marathon. You may have to slow down or even walk part of it, but you can do it. Trust me, you're already capable. I know it. And I know you could do it in under 5 hours." I thought for a moment, why run that far? It was like Malcolm was reading my mind. The next thing he said was, "Because people with self-esteem do estimable things." I got quiet. I wasn't sure about running that far, but once again, I knew that if Malcolm recommended it, it was something that I could do. I started trying to figure out just how far 26.2 miles was. My math skills had improved since I started my own business, and it didn't take long for me to realize that 26.2 miles was almost 3 times around the lake. Malcolm's voice interrupted my division. "There's a marathon next month in Chicago. Gary and I are going, and you're welcome to join us." Gary chimed in. "Running a marathon is one of the coolest things you'll ever do. Dude, I can tell you why. When you finish, it's like every good thing you've ever done rolled up into one." Malcolm nodded. "You'll never forget your first marathon. I've done 41, and I can still remember my first. Do you want to run the marathon with us?" "Yes, I'll do it." Malcolm smiled and continued the run in silence, appearing lost in his memories.